Hello, it's Francie. Welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of the process for making this little penguin comic I have, which was my final project for one of my subjects back in the first semester of my first year in my animation course. You can watch part 1 where I showed the first half of the process for this and where I talked about what I like about making comics. I'll also have it up in the card and I'll have the link for the video in the description below. In this video, I'll be talking about what I don't like about making comics, as someone who mostly makes them for fun or for school. And just to mention it here as well, I actually do have a short comic that I published on Amazon. You can check it out in the links in the description below. Let's not waste any more time and get straight into it. There's actually not a lot that I don't like about making comics, so this might just be quicker than the previous video I made. First up, the main thing I really don't like about making comics is that it's so time consuming. It takes a lot of time to not only think of a story if you don't already have one, but to also do all the processes involved in making a comic. From scripting out the story to figuring out the layout or paneling of the pages. And let's not forget actually drawing the whole thing. It takes a lot of time and energy. Honestly, I think this is also one of the things that stops a lot of people from ever pursuing their dreams of making a comic. And when you've got a busy schedule, whether you're a student or if you're already working and have a job, it can be very difficult to find the time to make multiple sketches or drawings for a story that you want to turn into a comic. Even short comics like what I usually do still take up a lot of time to make. And related to this, there are a lot of things to do when making a comic. Like, a lot. You have to do all the paneling, all the sketching, you have to ink and line every page if your comic calls for it, then you have to color the pages again if your comic calls for it. Then you can't have a comic without lettering, and lettering is a whole science of its own. There are lots of rules and standards when it comes to lettering a comic that you may not realize. I actually used a site which I'll put up on the screen right now since I can't quite remember the name, but it basically has a lot of the basics of lettering that you have to keep in mind when making a comic, especially making a clear and readable one. I could talk about this more, but hopefully this helps at least one of you guys. But yeah, making comic takes a lot of work and a lot of people don't realize that. And if you're making a comic for the first time, especially if you're being ambitious and making a huge comic with a whole series, you might get a bit overwhelmed. This is also why I recommend starting small and figuring out a process that works for you first. Making comics is pretty much just making a lot of finished drawings or illustrations in one page, and then repeating that process for several more pages or chapters until your story is finished. You can consider one panel, one scene as an illustration of its own. And considering comics usually have a lot of panels, that's a lot of drawing. It's pretty much how I feel about making animations sometimes as well. A ton of work, but the end results are usually worth it. Just remember to start small and gradually go from there. I didn't expect to be giving tips in this video, but oh well, here we are. As I mentioned in the previous video, if you work with a team, you can split the work needed to finish a comic. But you do trade a bit of freedom, I guess. Especially if it's someone else's story, or a lot of people are editing and possibly cutting scenes out. Making comics could sometimes also incur costs. I mean, obviously it costs time, effort, and energy, but depending on your process, it can also cost you money for the materials. I've never really had to spend a lot of money on art materials before, even when making comics, but that's mostly because I make my art and comics primarily digitally. But as I mentioned in the previous video, I do have a process where I do the line art for my comics traditionally, which obviously means I need pens and inks, and paper, of course. In my case, I'm lucky enough that my family has a printer, but if you're gonna be making comics with a similar process to mine, you'll need a printer. And yes, there are still a lot of people who I've seen make comics traditionally. There's something about it that I personally really like, but you do have to factor in the cost of the materials. I've had a few classmates tell me that I'm rich in ink, since I was inking a lot of pages for a comic at school. And if you think about it, yeah, that is a lot of ink to spend on a comic page. But again, it's my process and I like the end results. Just not the cost for the materials, since costs can add up. Though I use very cheap gel pens and brush pens anyway. I think I can relate this to digital art programs that are paid for. So if you're considering a paid art program or software, obviously there's the cost for that as well. I use Krita, which is completely free, but I do sometimes wish that I could get the comic making features that are available in Clip Studio Paint, for example. But I can't really afford to spend money on software yet, and I do really like Krita. It just really depends on your process. The main cost of making a comic for me anyway is always my time, effort, and energy. It's, again, like making an animation. Tons of work, costs me a lot of time and patience, but it's fun. What's not fun though is when you have a particular scene in mind for your comic or artwork, but you can't quite translate it well onto your paper or canvas. What I mean to say is, sometimes my skills are just not up to the level of the scenes that I want to be drawing. Which is just something that improves once you get better at art in general. But it's still frustrating, especially with comics that have lots of scenes. I end up having to simplify a lot whenever I can't draw a scene the way my mind pictures it. This is just a call to myself to improve some more, but let's be honest, it's like eating vegetables for some people. I love vegetables, but you get the point. It's bitter medicine or like studying for school. Learning the basics is boring, it's not as fun as drawing cool scenes. But at the same time, I really want to get better at my foundations when it comes to drawing, so that whenever I have a scene that I want to draw, I can draw it without being so frustrated about it. I always try to find ways to make learning a bit more fun, whether it be looking for nice references or drawing characters I like, but I still have a lot to improve. It's something you kind of face when you're still in the middle of learning to draw, and when you're busy, it can be hard to find the time. So yeah, complex scenes and my art skills do not get along well and I don't like it. But perhaps in the future, it will be less of a pain. The last thing I can think of at the moment would be when you actually finish your comic or a page or a chapter and you upload it online or make it available to others. And the work that you put into it isn't really that recognized or appreciated. What I mean to say is, you can work hours or days on a chapter, and people will read it for a few seconds before moving on to the next page, or asking when the next chapter will come out. I don't have much experience with this since I haven't been uploading comics online for a long time. I mean, I used to have an Instagram account for comics, but I don't have it now. It didn't work out very well. But anyways, I personally stop to admire and appreciate the artworks in the comics that I read, whenever I can, since it can quite often be overlooked. It's the same thing with animation. Again, I'm an animation student, that's just how I relate things. Lots of time and effort put into the work, and most people won't really stop to appreciate it. That's just media and consumer demand along with people's attention spans. So yeah, it's quite a bit to think about, but it's what usually happens, especially for big comics or series. That's why a lot of artists or writers get burned out a lot. It's something systemic or even inevitable that comes with the craft. So sometimes artists and writers just have to sit with that, you know. Whew, that's a lot. But yeah, who knew making silly comics could come with such thoughts? But that's just how it is sometimes. There's also that plateau in the middle of the progress where you think, when will I ever be done? Or it feels like you're not making any progress at all, especially for bigger projects, which isn't fun, but the end results usually make it worth it. For me, anyways. I like making comics despite all of these, and I have a lot of fun. And hopefully I'll get back to making some comics in the future, and possibly, maybe, uploading them online as well, again, just to give it another shot. Anyways, that was a lot to talk about, between this video and the previous one, and a lot of rambling on my part. But yeah, I think this wraps it up for my thoughts. and I'd love to know what you guys think. With all that said anyway, this comic is done. It's a silly comic and I'll have the pages posted on my channel so you guys can read it better. When I have more of these silly little comics, I might upload them on Tapas or something. Who knows? In the meantime, you can support me here on this channel by watching these videos, and you can also support me on Ko-fi. I also have a PDF version of my comic there, which I would recommend to get if you're looking to get a copy of it, since there are a couple of formatting issues with the ones I did on Amazon. Which is also another thing. If you're making comics, make sure the format you're making them is appropriate for where you're going to be hosting that comic. But yeah, anyways, thank you for watching and listening to me ramble while watching penguins get drawn on the screen. I hope you enjoyed and I hope you have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.